Advertising Council Australia would like to begin by acknowledging and paying our respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today. Advertising Council Australia would like to acknowledge their culture of storytelling through art, dance and music, and we pay respect to the elders past, present and future on other lands throughout all communities who might be participating today.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2024 Australian Effie How to Enter webinar. As our guests are just appearing on the screens, you'll see that we're lucky enough to have Colin, Martin and Al with us, and of course, Lindsay Davies, who runs the Effie program for Australia. So just a little bit about this webinar before we get into the nitty-gritty. The first thing is that it is being recorded. We do this deliberately so we can load it onto the Effie website, and people that have unfortunately missed this webinar will be able to catch up later. And you'll see down the bottom of the webinar that there's a Q&A box. All questions, if you've got them, and we hope you've got plenty because we'll entertain those at the end of the webinar, should go through the Q&A box, not the chat. The chat is for other purposes. So if you could please, any questions through the Q&A, and feel free to reveal who you are if you want to, because we'll go through everything. So today, what we're going to do is, firstly, we'll go through Colin Wilson-Brown will take us through planning for effectiveness in 2024. Martin Rippon will talk about what's new in 2024. You will be well aware that every year we review the Effie program and make tweaks, and he's got some news for us today. Al Crawford is going to be doing a very interesting thing on judge insights and tips, I think in 10 minutes, Al, that might be. And Lindsay, and you need to pay attention to Lindsay because she understands everything about the entry portal. So make sure you listen to Lindsay because she can make it a lot easier. And at the end, we'll be doing a Q&A. So just before we pass over to Colin, just a couple of quick things. And the first thing I'd like to acknowledge is that Think TV, we've been very fortunate to have as our marquee sponsor for 6 or 7 years now. And I'll talk a little bit what we get out of the sponsorship. But we've also got supporting partners in Meta, Tracksuit are new, Ad Standards and Unlimited are back, and the OMA is new. So we're still working with supporting partners for the Effie program. Now, the thing about the Think TV have been involved for 6 or 7 years now, as I said. And the major thing that has enabled us to do is to build an Effie effectiveness database with 464 case histories, can you believe? It grows every year. By this time next year, we'll be well over 550, heading towards 600. The thing about the Effie database is that it's enabled us to do our own studies of effectiveness and what's really driving effectiveness in Australia and indeed compared to other countries. We've now launched 4 reports over the last 4 or 5 years. Australian Advertising Effectiveness Rules, where we compared Australia to the long and the short of it with Peter Field and Les Binet. Winning or Losing in a Recession, to ESOV and Beyond that brought Karen Nelson Field into it. And more recently, we did Attention and Effectiveness, which also had Karen Nelson Field. And we had a webinar with System 1 and Orlando Wood. Rob Britton manages the Effie database for us. We're very fortunate to have Rob do that, and he's very much part of the global effectiveness scene. The 2020 review, we do a review every year, and we do a survey and feedback. We had 61 agencies and 23 clients in that review, so that's the basis upon which we tweak the Effies every year. And just so you know, coming up, we do have a AA&A and ACA Insights Effectiveness Masterclasses in Melbourne on May 28 and in Sydney on June 6. That'll be similar to the Work Behind the Work, but we're targeting the marketing community, and they'll be held at the Telstra Insights centres in both markets. And for anybody that's trying to enhance their team's capabilities in strategy and effectiveness, just remember that our At-School program and IPA program have got many really good courses. Advanced strategic planning, base strategic planning are all there. And semester 1 kicks off in April, so have a look and see if there's anything that you think might be of useful for your teams. So with that, I'll pass over to Colin, and Colin will take you through a little bit of history behind the Effies.
Okay, well, hello everyone. Well, welcome to this webinar. I'm a great believer in the power of creativity, as I hope everybody here is, and I respect the value of creative awards in driving the craft of advertising and the skills of creative people and indeed strategic people. But I think the most important advertising awards are the ones that demonstrate the value of what we do, whether that be to build brands, stimulate sales, or achieve social behavior change. Now, the first Advertising Effectiveness Awards in Australia took place in 1990. I can guarantee that because I was there. I was the founder and, believe it or not, the chairman. So I'm thinking of entering myself for a long-term effectiveness award as an individual. But they ran for 20 years, running every second year. And at that time, they weren't annual. And after 20 years, they'd kind of maybe got into a bit of a rut. And we then decided to relaunch them in 2009 as the Effies. See the next slide, please. Yeah, the Effies. And the Australian Effie Awards, which run in 50 countries, honour Australia's most significant achievements in marketing communications, ideas that work and contribute to a brand's success. So it's the same philosophy as the original Advertising Effectiveness Awards, but being international, the international agencies in particular put some value on the currency of winning these awards. And the Australian Effie Awards honour the most significant achievements. So I think I've covered that bit. I'm a slide behind. Sorry about that. The top award is the Grand Effie. Now that's the best of show. We have now had 15 Grand Effie winners since 2009, and I won't go through all of them. They've come from agencies big and small from all over Australia, from diverse categories: road safety, confectionery, pillows. Yes, pillows. Road safety again, insurance, anti-smoking, drink, fresh meat, and going on to more recent ones, onto coffee, government, that was the Defence Force, beer, retail, insurance again, fast food, and biscuits. So as you can see, there's enormous diversity. You can enter anything in any category and have the potential to win the Grand Effie. Martin will be taking you through those categories and the scoring process as well. But I'll just explain 5 special awards that we have, 4 of which you can enter, but 4 of which you can't enter, but you can win. And the 5th is for your clients. Now, the first of those, I'm gonna read these out so you know what the rules are, but it's the Best Small Estate campaign, won in 2023 by Moe's Hot Dogs from South Australia. Now, that would not have been on the radar from anybody, and congratulations to Show Pony, the agency that actually entered that campaign and won the Best Small Estate category. It's purely for entries from businesses outside Sydney or Melbourne. Those who qualify and score well in round 1 judging will be automatically entered in this category at no additional fee. So you don't enter it, we choose you if you enter and put you into that category. The second one is the Chairman's Award, known as the Colin Wilson Brown Chairman's Award, which I find quite an honour. Was won last year. In fact, last year was the first time we had it, and the notion was to celebrate the entry that most captures the chairman's imagination. But it will be selected from the silver and bronze Effie winners that didn't win a gold Effie, because we figured that if you win gold, you've got recognition enough. And last year, I awarded that to the Tuvalu, or Tuvalu, however it's pronounced, Digital Nation campaign. Then the Grand Effie is chosen from the the Grand Effie is chosen from the campaigns that have been judged already as gold winners. So, you know, you've got to win gold and be nominated for gold and win gold by the jury to be in consideration for the Grand Effie. And last year's winner was for Arnott's Biscuits from Saatchi & Saatchi. We then go on to choose the effective agency of the year. Now that's chosen not by the judges, it's chosen simply by a scoring system. We get points for gold, silver or bronze, points for different cases, different clients that have entered, and we have a sort of a methodology for that, which produces the winner. So it's always statistically based, and no one can be blamed for any personal choice on it. Last year, that went to the CHEP Network. First time they've won that award, and they broke a long string of wins from the Monkeys and BMF, which was good, although we love to see entries from those two agencies and every other agency as well. And then finally, we choose the effective advertiser of the year, and this is by invitation to choose and this is about the client that has actually most demonstrated effectiveness through the awards and through their general culture of pursuing effectiveness in advertising. Last year's winner was KFC. So an Effie may indeed be difficult to win, but over the last 5 years, we've given out over 200 awards. So there's plenty of opportunity for everybody. For gold obviously is hardest, silver is a bit easier, bronze is easier than that, and the special I've just mentioned. We've celebrated many wonderful campaigns that have demonstrated how insightful strategy and clever ideas can build and protect brands and challenge people's behavior, change people's behavior. We've provided proof, I think, that advertising works, and that's really what the awards are all about. So I hope you who are watching this will enter this year. Winning an Effie, I think, reminds your clients of the great job you're doing. It can attract new business for your agency, which is good, and it can look pretty cool on your CV as well, and that can't be too harmful. So thank you for attending, and I wish you success. Martin is now going to explain the categories in more detail and the process.
Thank you very much, Colin. So yeah, really, I'm going to talk about some of the more functional stuff you need to think about ahead of entering. Then Al will talk to you a little bit about how to craft a great entry. And then we will move on to Lindsay, who will talk about actually getting that entry into the format. So every year we try to make things a little bit better. So our ears are always open to feedback. And that process, we get quite a bit of feedback at around about 10:30 on an October night, with a bit of beer and wine infusing it. And so we take that, we've had the survey as well, and we just really pull all the feedback together. And 5 things that we've done for 2024. One of the bits of feedback was that the questions can be a bit repetitive, and that was both from judges and from entrants. So we've actually reduced that down from 10 questions to 8 questions now. So there is less to write, less to answer, less to read, and less to judge. But hopefully it is really getting to the clear part of what makes this entry particularly strong. Sort of allied to that, some of the cases are really long. This is the judge's comment in particular. And remember, when you're writing a case study, you are writing it for judges to read. So the executive summary, we really want to up the ante on that. It is important, it gets marks, and it really sets out why this is a great case study, why this campaign has been effective, and why it should win awards. There's always a request to incorporate new categories. So last year we brought in social media first and CX, and this year we'll be bringing in an AI category, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. One of the other comments we've had is that it can be a bit cost prohibitive if you just run a small campaign. So what we did last year was we reduced the price for small budget campaigns to enter, and that seemed to be very successful. So we do get quite a few small budget campaigns coming in. And so again, we're really interested in that, because from small things, big things grow. And one of the other comments we get is this is only for big brands and agencies. And I think what we've seen over the last few years is that while, you know, a lot of those bigger agencies do have some of the more famous campaigns, there's actually a lot of room and scope for smaller agencies, smaller clients, smaller budgets to win awards. It's all about effectiveness. And just to try and encourage that, we have actually reduced entry fees for any of you who might be new to entering the Effie Awards, and details of that are all written in the format. So what you'll see are two lists where you enter your awards. I won't run through this all. Again, it's well defined in the entry guide. List A is really about the different categories, and most case studies will be entered into that. And then list B is really divided into the specialist categories. So we have one area which is all about specific challenges. So for small budget, for challenger brands, for positive change. Then there is a whole area around innovation. So most original thinking, insight and strategic thinking, et cetera, et cetera. And then the final one is about metrics. So return on investment, short-term effects, long-term effects, brand value. And I'll just pause on that one for a second. So these are the effectiveness awards. So it's very important for us that you demonstrate to the judges that the campaign has been effective. It's great if you've also got the data to show that it's delivered a return on investment, and we give you thoughts on how you can calculate that. But we also are well aware that it's not always possible to have all of the data to calculate an absolute return on investment for every campaign. So it's effectiveness first, but if you're entering into metrics, you probably need to have some of that data as well. Okay, on to AI. So this is what happens if you say, show us an AI picture in ChatGPT. And the next slide shows you the definition of AI as ChatGPT would come up with it. So the first thing to mention is, while we imagine some of you will be thinking about using ChatGPT to write your awards in other categories, that's fine. It's absolutely a great editor. It's a great way of cutting things down. But as you will see from that definition there, it ain't necessarily user-friendly when it comes out. It's well written, very robust, but really doesn't help us. So just be very, very careful if you are using AI, generative AI, to help you write the case study, that you still make sure that it has the human touch and it has that storytelling element that makes it so important. But on to the actual AI category itself. It is a new category. It's something that's being run with the Effies across the world. We don't really know what sort of case studies we're going to get into this, because AI is that whole new area. The judging criteria is, well, I guess the first thing is it actually an AI case study? Does the AI component deliver a critical role in the activity? And that could be at the strategy stage, the delivery stage, or the evaluation stage. And again, back to not wanting to harp on about this, but does the case study demonstrate effectiveness? So is using AI making this more effective than not using AI, if anyone has done those tests? And what you see on the right-hand side of the page is the definition. I'm not going to suggest you try and read it now. The definition that goes through what goes into that category, what we're expecting, et cetera, et cetera. So that is, and even the word count that you can put into the prompt for ChatGPT. The final point I will make before Al goes on into how to make this engaging, entertaining, and robust: answer the questions. So there are now 8 questions, and with each question, there are points awarded that the judges will mark. Those points do change depending on what the category is. So that's the same for all of the first blush category entrants. But if you're doing an ROI entry, then you will be getting more than 5 points. I think you get 25 points for was the campaign a good investment. So look at how many points there are when you're allocating those precious words across the whole of the case study. Make sure you're putting the words where the words are going to get the most points. And if I can say one other thing before I hand over to Al, it's, keep it simple, but keep it robust. So make sure there's an easy story for us to understand and make it easier for us to say that's a great case study. Over to you, Al.
Thank you very much, Martin. I'm going to feed off some of the stuff that you said because it was excellent. I have put together some Natalie titled principles that I hope will be relevant to you, whether you are a gnarled old pro at these things or a fresh-faced newbie in terms of entering these awards. So I just thought I'd sort of run through them, and hopefully there'll be either a magnificent refresher course or they might prompt some new sort of thinking, but they definitely feed off what Martin was talking about as well. So the first one is obviously shorter is sweeter. There is a word count. Obviously, we need to stick to it. I know it varies by category. I think 3,500 in general, but there are some longer ones, 4,500. I think it's fair to say that obviously sticking to that word count is obviously something that needs to be done, but better still, come in underneath it. I know that you will have a tsunami of information that you want to communicate, but think of the judges. They are people that are tired at the end of the day with limited processing power and a high thirst for vengeance. And there is always an advantage to coming in shorter as a result of it. And even when I think about that sentence structure as well, try and get rid of those subordinate clauses and just make it as punchy as possible. So I think shorter is sweeter is one of the sort of first ones on the menu. The second one kind of feeds off that a bit as well, which is, I think, think like an academic, write like a journalist. It's definitely the case with these papers that, you are going to be guilty until proven innocent is the opposite of a court of law. And there will be some very wily judges that are looking for holes and inconsistencies in your paper. So it is well worth thinking about how can you make this as bulletproof as possible, and how can you make sure that it, when it gets punched in the face, it still comes up smiling as well. I think the thing about it, though, is that if you subsequently end up writing the paper or writing a paper that is as dry as the Gobi Desert, you will probably find that you won't get the sort of full marks as a result. So try and write a rollicking, bodice-ripping tale if you can, and write like a journalist. It is important that these things sort of roll off the tongue. And I think, to misquote Malcolm Gladwell, you need to be right and interesting at the same time. And it is one of those things that we work in a business that is obviously about rigor, but is also about advocacy as well. And so combining those two things is super important. And the best papers are very much written by uber nerds, but communicated by brilliant advocates as well. So that's a very important thing as well. A third one, which I think when you get into the sort of weeds of the Effies, you can forget very quickly, but beware the curse of knowledge. And that is that sort of cognitive bias that we all have. You are knee deep in the category, you know all the players, the game, and also the ridiculous acronyms that are bandied around. Don't assume that judges know that. And indeed, we try and choose judges that aren't connected to your category and don't have a sort of a set of kind of preconceptions or embedded knowledge about it. So take the time to explain who's who, what's what, and why you're using weird 3-letter acronyms that nobody's ever heard about. It is incredible how that sets you up for success, because it gives you a predisposed judge that says, thank you for laying this on a plate, rather than making it tricky for me as a result. The fourth one, very simple, read other papers, particularly from the same category. I know that we have an excellent database available to everyone, but there are obviously other sources of information that your agencies may be party to in terms of WARC and the IPAs, for example, as well. but reading other papers is super useful. It may not be something that will improve your quality of life, but it will certainly improve your quality of paper. And I think in particular, ones from the same category that give you a sense of the sort of the narratives that have been told in that category before, what you want to adopt and imitate, and what you want to kind of jettison is super important. I think particularly in terms of discounting other factors as well, it's an incredible shortcut to read the discounting other factors that other people have used, because you can use those as a sort of launching off point for what you do. Obviously, plagiarism is illegal, but imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. And I think it's very useful to have read and stand on the shoulders of the giants that have come before you. So that's the fourth principle. Number 5, make sure your paper has vicious symmetry. I don't know why I wrote vicious. It just sounded more dramatic than symmetry. So I added an adjective to it. But obviously, we're all familiar with the fact that we write, or we've seen briefs that have been written that are cowpats rather than runways, that feature a number of different sort of factoids and a number of different potential avenues that you can kind of go in. Same goes for Effie papers. Is really, you know, the best Effie papers feel inevitable and inexorable, and the challenge leads to the objectives, leads to the solution, leads to the results in many ways. And, you know, in really simple form, the objectives are reflected in the results that you see later on. It is stunning how many papers it feels like somebody has sort of put a kind of random word generator in there, and they go off in all sorts of different directions. So it's very, very important that everything that you do has that sort of vicious symmetry attached to it, and you feel that sort of inexorable pull through the paper, and that the front half is really reflected in the back half as well. The 6th one, I know that obviously standing in front of a piece of paper about price elasticity in the insurance industry can feel quite intimidating, and writing those 3,500 words can feel quite intimidating. I think Gene Fowler said writing is easy, you just have to stare at a piece of paper until drops of blood come out of your forehead. I feel that way a lot of the time, so I think often it's best to chunk it down and build a kind of logic flow before the long version. It's super useful to have a set of bullet points, because that gives you the spine that you're going to be kind of keeping to as you go through it. It'll make it shorter and sweeter, it'll make it more logical, and it'll make it less intimidating as well as you put in the flowing prose around it. Edit, the 7th principle. Ernest Hemingway said the first draft of anything is shit, and he was definitely right there. It may even be that the 2nd and 3rd draft are a bit rubbish as well. My advice would be, as much as you can and as much as time allows, obviously thrash out the first version and then proceed to edit as ruthlessly and viciously as possible. Obviously, with all of these things, sometimes it helps to get a kind of external eye. It can be deeply humiliating at times, but it was also very worthwhile as well. It's always a good test as to whether you've put down gibberish that nobody else understands apart from your kind of good self. So that discipline is really, really important. Number 8, constructing a causal chain from comms to in-market results. The diminutive emperor of effectiveness, Les Binet, said that no proof is ever perfect, and I totally agree with that. But, you know, realistically, what we're trying to set up with these papers is very obvious directional correlations that demonstrate that your activity has led to results, and better still, a sort of waterfall of results that lead probably from communications into brand impact, into potentially behavioral impact, and for the commercial papers into sales or share or revenue or profit results as a result of it, and demonstrating that you can fill in every single element of that chain, and that chain is as strong and as tight as possible, is really, really important. Now, if you've got econometrics, funky maths, which luckily is being more and more democratized these days, splendid, and that's excellent as well. But take the time also to explain how the model works, not in its technical kind of capacity, but also just to unpack some of the variables that have kind of gone in there as well. It's amazing how the best papers in some ways feel like they've set up this incredibly strong sort of causal chain, and that you can see suspicious by-eye correlations, and you can see this cascade of metrics that happens right the way up from comms into the kind of business results as well. The ninth one is just to avoid the impression that you're kind of data doctoring. I'm sure none of us would do this because we're all ethical human beings, but it does, just make sure that you are not looking like you are selecting arbitrary time series or making comparisons that feel a bit sort of gerrymandered or chopping off data for kind of no good reason. It's often, like long time series data feels, uninterrupted long time series data, and I know all of us don't have it, feels about as transparent as it possibly can be. But certainly just, making sure that your data looks as transparent and as honest and as undoctored as possible is kind of great as well. There are often some excellent charts that look like they've employed Axis Wizard, as I like to call it, where they've made marginal differences seem massive just by manipulating the axis. That's absolutely legitimate if those marginal changes have resulted in massive kind of impact. But just beware that often the judges are looking with skeptical eyes at some of the charts that look like mountains when they may very well be molehills as well. And then the final thing is just to say it takes a village to raise a paper. I know that in the end, ultimately, you want to be doing the double gun solo salute on the stage on your own. But ultimately, this is going to be a collective effort, and in particular, collaboration with your client, who is your greatest ally and will probably understand both the story as well as, if not better than you, but will also understand the corporate appetite in terms of what story can be told as well. Getting them on board and collaborating with them is going to be kind of crucially important. And also in the end pays dividends because, as Colin was saying earlier, this tends to be something that when done collaboratively boosts both of your careers as a result of it. And this shouldn't be limited only to your client partner as well, but there are going to be different people that are going to be contributing to this as well, both from a channel strategy point of view and also from a tracking or data point of view, and potentially from an econometrics point of view as well. Get everybody in the tent. It is magnificent when papers are clearly a brilliant collective effort, and they really shine through those ones as well. And they are, success has many fathers and mothers. And so that should be our attitude when it comes to it. That having been said, sadly, in the end, heavy sits the Effie's crown, and somebody ultimately will have to hold the pen. So to you, congratulations or commiserations, but decide on who that is relatively early, seize that responsibility, and try to enjoy it as much as is humanly possible. So there you go. There is 10 principles in 10 minutes. I hope it was useful. If it hasn't been, I should be desperately disappointed. And I'll hand over to Lindsay now, who will take us through some very excellent things about how to enter.
Thanks so much, Al. Thank you. So I run the Effie program here in Australia, and I'm here to help you throughout the whole process. So today I'm going to take you through how to use the portal. So we recommend you get in early, register early, and set up your entry. Just go to effiesawards.awardsplatform.com to start your entry. All the rules are within the portal and also within the entry guide that you'll find on our website. So eligibility this year is for campaigns that have ran within Australia between the 1st of April 2022 and the 31st of May 2024. So make sure that when you're writing your paper that your campaigns and your data correlate to those dates. It's super important for eligibility. This year we have 3 deadlines. We've got our on-time deadline on the 13th of May, an extended deadline on the 27th of May, and a late entry deadline on the 3rd of June. So with each, as we get closer to the extended deadline and the late deadline, there are penalty fees for submitting your entry late. So most cost effective is to get your entries in on time. I'm going to take you through what you need to do. You go into the portal and you find all of the information there, key dates, etc. Go up to the Enter tab to start your entry. Once you press the button, Start Your Entry, you'll be able to find all your entries at the bottom there. Go into the Start here and select the category. Within the category, you can find the key information there about scoring. And you can also download all of the questions that correlate with your particular category, so that you might share that and have it as an easy reference. Make sure that you take a note of the word count, 3,500 words, and then you just go through and fill in your key information before you move on to the entry form. And once you get to the entry form, you tab through to this, you'll see that we have a new question which is scored. The executive summary has been merged with one of the questions from the last year's paper. Why does this case deserve an award? It's scored this year. Check out how many points are awarded. It's 400 words and an image as well. Simply copy and paste text, format with keyboard shortcuts, bold, caps, italics, make it really clear to read. You drag and drop your image, and there's instructions on the right-hand side. So what I'm going to do now is sort of take you through the entry form and what you need to do. So, and show you how easy it is to cut and paste. So set up your presentation deck. If you set it up to 1920 by 1080, it will give you, it'll spit out the images at the size that you need. Copy and paste your text into the fields. You can use keyboard shortcuts there to highlight what you need. So what I'm doing here is I'm literally dragging in my images into my PowerPoint presentation. This is a Google Doc. And then you can simply download your images as single JPEGs. Once you've set your presentation up at the 1920 by 1080, then you're going to get the high-res images that are needed for the judges. You just then drop it in, and you can test how big your image is by clicking on that link, and you can see there it's the 1920 size that we need for high-quality images. Now, I will be testing images, and if you do have any questions on that as you go through the entry process, please get in touch, and I'm just here to help you make it really easy for you. That. You go through to upload your creative. You can simply just add videos and stills of your campaign creative, dragging and dropping into the portal. We ask that you don't upload case study videos, because the entry of the written case study is what the judges are looking for. And you go through to the survey. This is the Ad Council Effectiveness Data Questionnaire that we do every year. It's confidential. It is mandatory, but it's not part of your entry. We use it for research purposes to analyze patterns and trends in effectiveness over the years. So it's super important for what we do here at Effie's. Now, you only need to fill in one of these surveys per campaign. So if you've got one campaign that you're entering into 4 categories, just fill in one of these surveys. Then you get to the approval section and publication and credits. You make sure that you have approval for your client and agency. Within the portal, there's recommended text that you can use, copy and paste it into your own letterhead and then upload. We do ask that you give permission to publish your entry. It's super important for education, and I'm sure you will all enjoy reading the case study histories as well from previous winners. So we ask that you only remove sensitive information only, and only if you need to. And then this is where you add the credits for each of your individual contributors that we use when you get through to the final stage of the award show. So here's the link for downloading your entry guide. So you can get it on our website. So make sure you do that, have a read through, and please ask me if you've got any questions, and I'm here to help you. And we want to talk about effectiveness. So we know that effectiveness is more important than ever. So marketers are scrutinizing budgets, budgets are dropping, and it's really essential for agencies and marketers to demonstrate that investment in marketing and advertising is a wise investment, and not just now, but over the next 3 to 5 years. So how do we get more people to focus more on effectiveness? We have a new campaign coming out, which is Does the Work Work? So we're bringing effectiveness into the vernacular. We all talk in agencies about the work, we celebrate the work, but at the Effies, we celebrate, does the work work? And this is exactly what the judges are looking for. So how do we get our clients and agencies teams talking more about effectiveness? Does it work? We want to contribute to creating a culture of effectiveness by getting everyone interested in if and how the work works. So when we don't want to just see what the work looks like, we want to know, did the work work? And then we will move on to Q&A. If all the panelists want to come on screen, you have the opportunity to ask any questions.
Thanks, Lindsay, Al, Martin, and Colin. I think we can probably, do we need the Q&A panel anymore, or we can probably just let that. So please ask any questions. We've got another 5 minutes. We've got a couple coming through. So if you've got any general or specific questions, please send them through. And we've got a couple of people that are fairly new to the Effies, we know, and we saw the registrations, but there's one question that's come through, and I'll pass it to all the panelists, but maybe start off with Colin, since he's been involved since 1990, is what advice would you give a new entrant?
Well, the most important advice that I would give, Tony, is to have attended this webinar. But look, I think one shouldn't be intimidated by the awards, and they can be intimidating for all the reasons that Al's articulated. But the starting point for me would be always to read past entries. Unfortunately, those are on the AFA website, sorry, Tony, AFA, I'm going back to the beginning here, but to the Ad Council's website, and download the gold, some of the gold Effies indeed, if you can find some that are in categories that are similar to yours, but they don't have to be, because I think if you look at what it took to win gold from other people, then that gives you some indication of what you actually have to achieve.
Alan, Martin, have you got anything to contribute to that?
Yeah, I think I would just echo one of Al's points, actually. Having been on the client side when an agency has wanted to write a case study, and that is you actually have to sell the benefit of winning an award to the client, because clients do tend to have lots of varieties of things going on, and getting the data from a truculent finance director or finance manager isn't always the priority. So I think if you can sell the benefit to the client, that this will actually really make you make the client understand about the effectiveness of their campaign, help their career, and so it's more than just having a nice evening out in Sydney. Yeah. Al?
Yeah, no, what you guys said is obviously, I totally agree. I would just say that in the end, the pain, and there will be elements of pain, is very definitely worth the game. So push through it. And when you get to the other side, it is magnificent, because they are so much more useful than just the award itself. They serve as a brilliant way of articulating everything from strategy to kind of commercial outcome. And we can see from previous winners that they get merchandise relentlessly, both inside your organization, inside a client's organization, to the industry as a whole. And so they are very, very worthwhile. And, the benefit over time is huge as well. So take the temporary pain and embrace the long-term gain.
And I'll probably add one further thing. If you're brand new and you'd like a bit of help, by all means, contact Lindsay, because we have a panel of Effie mentors that are very successful. They're very generous with their time, and they're happy to step you through the process over a series of month or two with a couple of quick meetings and feedback sessions. So they tend to be very accomplished strategic planners who have won plenty of Effies in the past. We've got another one, and I don't know the answer to this, but it's an interesting one. It's a very, it's what's the lowest budget investment a winning campaign has ever had? And I think Martin's raised his hand. He wants to be first at cracking at this one.
Yeah, I think we have had campaigns that have been less than $50,000, maybe even less than that. I'm thinking about a particular data-driven campaign that won a bronze a couple of years ago, and that was, I say, less than 50,000. It wasn't even that, I don't think. Yeah.
That's it's funny you say that, Martin, because that's the exact figure I had in mind. And in fact, some of the shorter term entries, we've adjusted the criteria so it can be over shorter periods of time rather than relying on 6 or 9 months of data. And I think that helps with some of the smaller budget ones. So unless anybody has got anything to add, Colin, Al, you got anything to add to that? All right, we'll move on. Here's one that probably Al I might pass on to start off with, but Martin and Colin might come in, is what do you see as the major difference between question 2, what is the strategic communications challenge, and question 4, what was your strategy? Most good strategies culminate in good strategic challenge, so interested in where to put the insights.
Oh, wow.
The first thing I'd say to that is read a few of the past case histories, because that'll give you a bit of an answer. But for a more intellectual response, let's hear what Al says.
For a more idiotic response, I'll let Martin do this in a second, but here I think is the difference, is the challenge is very much the setup. And the question 4, what was your strategy, is very much the response to that. So in some ways, this is what we see with brilliant papers, as you say, Tony, is the setup and the context. Context is king for these papers, is what is in Stephen King's sort of words, where is your brand now and why is it there? Is really the questions that you are answering there. The challenges, and then the distillation of that challenge. And then subsequently, the strategy needs to be a brilliant solution to that challenge. So the difference between question 2 and question 4 is very much that in my mind's eye. Is one is the sort of is the upfront setup, and the other is the solution to that. But Martin will probably have a more succinct way of putting it.
I would say the first one is articulating the problem, and the second one is articulating the answer.
There you go, Al. Far more succinct.
Yeah.
Here's one is, what are the categories that tend to get lower numbers of entries, and what categories would you like to see embraced this year? And maybe I could give a quick answer to that, is that it changes from year to year, and there's 2 different parts of the answer. Firstly is list A, where there's an industry, and it's remarkable how some years you might get a category such as automotive, get 4 or 5 entries or even more one year, and then very little the following year. And it often coincides with new product launches or new model launches in that case. But within the specials categories, they change from year to year. I don't think there's any one category that we like to promote. We follow the categories. We tweak them every year if we're not getting entries. But some just go dormant for a year or 2 and then spring to life for no reason. Anybody, Colin, you got anything?
Yeah, look, I think I totally agree with what you were saying. It does vary. I mean, if they're consistently low, we drop them, and then we bring in new ones to see what happens, such as the AI one. We don't know whether we're going to get 1 entry or 20, but I mean, that's certainly something we'd like to encourage, because we do like to see new entries. We always get a lot for things like insight and strategic thinking. For most original thinking, we get plenty of entries in those. Some of the others have always been a bit of a struggle. Health has been a struggle for us, and so is data. Funnily enough, as well, data and research. We've found that to be a struggle over the years. People don't, although we've seen some very good campaigns in the use of data, we don't get very many, so those are issues for us. But the main category is the category A list, as you say, Tony. It varies from year to year. But we want to see entries in every category. We don't like it when we actually have to not give an award because of a paucity of entries or indeed quality of entries. We'd like to give awards in every category. So please keep them coming.
And I'll say, especially the small budget ones, we like to see the smaller ones because often they're very innovative. They can be not too hard to write if you've got the right metrics in place, and the judges really respond to them. Any advice? Oh, that just jumped around. Any advice on how to infuse your personal style voice into an Effie paper? Asking from a first-time Effie entry writer. And Al, you're very good on style and voice. Maybe you could have the first crack at that one.
Jesus, I don't know. I think, you know, obviously people have very different styles attached to things. I suppose in some ways, yes, we all have an authentic voice. So write to that, but recognize equally that you need to be writing for the judges as well. I think the best way of doing it, as ever, comes back to read some of the papers that have won and start to see which parts of that you'd like to mimic and which parts of that you think you can improve on. But that's always the best base for me, is to read other papers and start to think about, well, which parts of this do I want to go, what style here do I want to infuse into my paper, and what do I want to add that's kind of uniquely my own. I think the other thing is that although these papers, they may feel at times difficult, try and enjoy it as much as possible, because the more you enjoy it, I guarantee you, the more the audience will feel that energy and enjoyment in it as well.
Can I add to that, Tony? Look, I think the thing to focus on here is clarity of expression rather than style. And by all means, if you want to drop in a bit of your own personal wit, but I mean, don't overdo it, because if the judges don't find that particularly funny, or they find it a bit of a sort of try hard, then it's going to do you more damage than good. But I've read, as I think as Tony said, I've read more cases than anybody else in the country over the years. And I'd be hard put to recognize an author by just picking it up. And I don't think it's really, this is not about writing a novel. You know, as Al said, it's about perhaps taking a journalistic style to it. And generally, you can't really recognize one journalist from another in that.
And just to pick on that, we've got a question: are the papers anonymised for judging, i.e., you can't see who the agency was? And that is the case. They're all anonymised when they go through. There was a follow-on from a previous question. Why has health been a struggle for awards? Colin, do you have a perspective on that?
Well, I suspect, look, I'm not really in the health industry myself, but I suspect that some of the drug firms in particular are very close in terms of their data, so they make it difficult for entries to actually for agencies to put the entries in. I think that would be an issue, although that doesn't apply to health in a government context. Because governments, state or federal, or any government organisation, are generally very pleased to show people how effective their work is. So I think from that kind of thing, you should see plenty of institutional cases, probably harder from the private sector.
I don't know the answer to this one. B2B campaigns. Any good example of Effies that come to mind? Because we do get B2B campaigns, and there used to be a lot in the finance market particularly. Can anybody think of good B2B campaigns recently? While you're thinking of that one, I'll go to a next one. I'm not quite sure I understand this, to be honest. Maybe somebody else was. Do judges account for double jeopardy in accounting for effectiveness?
I was hoping you were going to explain what was meant by it, but
well, I'm
happy to answer the question, but I don't understand it.
I think it might be Ehrenberg Bass's double jeopardy, where the smaller the smaller share of market you have, the harder it is to grow. I'm going to interpret it that way. Maybe Al or Martin's got a different interpretation. And if that's the case, I think there is probably a degree of difficulty taken into account by the judges when they're scoring. Would anybody pick up any comments on that?
I think the big thing here is, irrespective of the size of your brand, the role of the author and the role of the paper is to explain why the problem that you faced was difficult, the solution was good, and the results were impressive. And so I think, good judges will try and take out of the equation the sort of size of the brand. I understand that there are issues like, the double jeopardy applies to kind of small brands, but ultimately it's your responsibility as an author to demonstrate whether your brand is big, small, medium-sized, that you have managed to overcome the challenges that you kind of faced in an impressive fashion.
I think we've got time for one more question. And in answer to the B2B campaigns, I suggest the best thing to do is to hop onto the Effie's website. There's I think there's 13 years of Effie's campaigns there, so sort them out and have a look. But there are B2B campaigns in there. None immediately come to mind, but I know there have been some good ones. But we might finish on this one, and I bet it comes from a New Time. Oh, hang on, there's a couple more. But this one, any advice how to engage and motivate clients with effectiveness mission when they're traditionally tactical? Any training or events you'd suggest? And this has been around for a while, is that sometimes the clients can be the obstacle. But I'll pass over to the panel to see if they've got tips on how to get the clients on board, even if they're traditionally performance marketing oriented. Martin, have you got something to say?
I mean, I think, the tactical and effectiveness aren't necessarily opposites. So good tactical work can and probably is very focused on an ROI. So in the short-term world, I think that is still very important. In the longer term, building brand effectiveness, the long term of it. I'm just trying to think, Tony, with any of the AFA, the Advertising Council trainings and so forth coming up that would be good to get a client along to. I mean, possibly if we're rerunning the Arnott's case study as an example, that was very much.
We've got that coming up, and I said earlier in late May, early June, we've got a bit of a work behind the work with, and the Arnott's case study will be there.
So within that case study, there was a very clear shift from doing a lot of tactical promotional work into making sure that same money was used to build the overall brand. So that would be a great case study, and I'm sure there are many other case studies in the past. In terms of events, I think that would be the one that's coming up. Yeah.
And also, if you have a look at the Ad School core and advanced strategic planning, there are effectiveness modules in those.
And I just echo Martin's thing of, I think these papers ultimately are relentlessly results and return on investment driven. And it doesn't matter where in the funnel those come from. And in fact, in many ways, we'd welcome more people to enter, demonstrating that there may be some of those lower funnel activities that pay back fantastically in spades as well.
And finally, can entries not be campaign-based? For example, a platform developed to solve a business problem rather than a marketing campaign, and absolutely they can. Have a look at the definitions in particularly List B, where we've got CX and solutions other than marketing. There's quite a few categories where non-campaign-based work can be entered. And on that note, I think unless any of the panelists have got anything else to say, I'd like to thank everybody for attending. We've had some good numbers still on the webinar today that have held right through, but particularly I'd like to thank Colin, Martin, Al and Lindsay for taking the time out, which they do all through the year on the Effies, and making it the success that it really is, because we know the feedback from the market, the Effie Awards are the most valued award campaign, the award program in the Australian marketing, media and advertising landscape. So on behalf of everybody, I'd like to thank you for attending, and don't forget to download the entry guide. In fact, we might even be sending it to everybody on the webinar so you can have a quick look at it. Thank you, everyone.